velvet rope. Let's just get right into it today because we are joined by the one, the only Meredith Lynch.
Thank you for that introduction.
I mean, listen, welcome. We were just talking about how we're both local in LA, even though I'm not there today. But what's going on? How are you today?
I'm great. I stayed up so late last night reading the Britney Spears memoir that honestly, like I need to make an amends to my all of my English teachers because I can read a book in like 6 hours if I put my mind to it. It's amazing how fast I read it.
You read, so now, I mean, it's so funny because, like I was just saying, I wasn't going to talk about this, but then I added it to our list because it's literally, first of all, congratulations on reading it all in one night. That just should, I mean, is it, talk to me about it? Because I haven't read it. I mean, it's literally all anyone wants to talk about. It's every other story on page 6, the Daily Mail. Is it great? Is it like real? Do we believe everything in it? And I
Well,
haven't
here's
read it yet. So,
right. And here's what I'll say. I'm reading it both as like a fan and someone who also like consumes pop culture. And then also I'm a writer. And I'm like, I mean, people always joke around and are like, oh, you're a writer. Everyone says they're a writer, but I'm halfway done with my MFA in writing. So like I'm kind of a writer. So anyway, I am reading it through all of those lenses. And this is what I will say. It is a very fast read. It's fairly readable for the most part. It is, you are sort of able to follow it. It does jump around here and there. It definitely makes you realize how much generational trauma Britney has. Like there is serious generational trauma, and her mom and dad, I don't think are good or safe people for her. That's my biggest takeaway. It doesn't really double click on things. Like you're kind of like, okay, so like she was engaged to someone for like a year. Remember that guy she was engaged to?
yeah.
And it's just like a paragraph. You're like, wait a minute, like how did that happen? And like, so there's a lot of things that get skimmed over. And I think this is how I think, this is my interpretation of how it was probably written. I think probably she sat down with someone and they looked at a timeline of her life and she gave them additional details. And then that's kind of, it was probably more like an interview, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess whoever wrote it, like, it seems like they're very excited by all the Justin Timberlake stuff. I understand it. That's the world we live in. But to your point, there's so much more. Like, I saw one little blurb, like, did she dive into like Lindsay and Paris and all that stuff?
She talks a little bit about Paris and just like that it was a nice friendship and she's always been really nice to her. And she like makes reference to sort of the partying days and things. But like what it, I don't want to say that, it's badly written, but it's not engaging because it doesn't like details are what make a story really good. Like who said what?
Yeah.
What was the dialogue? Who was wearing what color was it? And it's missing that. And that's stuff that I don't put on a celebrity to try to put into their memoir. That's something that a decent ghostwriter could go in and help you suss out a little bit, right?
Yeah, like you
Specific.
want to get into the weeds almost because, like,
Yeah.
we know it wasn't a good breakup with Justin. And okay, it's interesting that he sent you 2 words of a breakup text and you were pregnant, but like, right, you want real details. I get it. Like, I
Right.
got the impression, and I haven't read it just from reading all the
Yeah.
articles, that it's a lot of just like clickbait. Let's just get it all in there and touch upon it. Okay, that's one more box checked off, and let's now move on to the next item, so to speak.
Yes. And I think like when people read it, I think one of the things that gives you a better sense of is the conservatorship. And so that part, I think it does do a better job of helping pull the curtain back on that. But I'll give you like one example. There's like a paragraph where she's like, I performed with Michael Jackson to celebrate like the 30th anniversary or something. And like a few days later was September 11th. And you're like, oh, whoa, okay. Like no details of like, what was it like to perform with Michael Jackson? Like where you got to have like one story, right? And then like next page is like in 2001, I filmed Crossroads. And you're like, wait a minute, that would have been before 9/11. So you're kind of like, wait, like when the timeline gets thrown off like that, I find as a reader it can be a little tricky. And a good ghostwriter would have said, no, 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 you got to put Crossroads before Michael Jackson, and you got to give people one Michael Jackson detail.
Yeah. Yes, yes, and yes. That's because, and now especially that's something that I mean, I didn't know Britney performed with Michael. I mean, it's not shocking. Of course, you must have at some point, but yeah, like we want a detail on that, of
Yeah.
course. Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you go? I mean, I'm not going to read either of these things because God knows when I would have time to do any of this. But are you going to read the John Stamos? Because that's also getting a lot of press.
I don't think I will, but I am kind of loving the clickbait articles. Like, I love the one that was like, John Stamos admits that Rebecca Romaine maybe wasn't the devil. I'm like, oh, like, oh,
It's
wow.
It's an interesting, and I just saw one today. It said, he actually talks about the Olsen twins and find out what he said. I mean, I'm sure it's nothing bad at all, but it's enough to make me want to click on this article. Well, listen, I mean, you are a TikTok sleuth. This is what you do. I mean, is there anything else other than Britney that's keeping you up at night these days? Or is it really, I mean, it really to me seems like this Britney memoir has taken over at least the past week or two.
Yeah, I do think that this Britney memoir is definitely going to be a big thing for a little while, and then it will fizzle out. Obviously, I've been thinking a little bit about Taylor and Travis Kelsey. I've been finding that to be kind of interesting. I do think people are starting to get burned out on it. And I think that will happen with Britney too. Do you find that like with topics you cover?
Oh my gosh. I find that I personally get burnt out before the lovely, thank God, like, thank you that I have an audience. I get burnt out pretty quickly. You know what it is? I say this all the time. I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. I love my job. I love what I do. I just feel like it really takes, like Erica and Tom Girardi, when that first hit, I was like, wow, I'm shocked. It takes a lot to like really shock me in the world of pop culture, just me. So it takes, you know what I mean? So I move on relatively quickly from a lot of things, if that
I
makes sense.
do too. Yeah, I agree. And I think people will probably be like, but you still talk about like XYZ thing. And like, it's usually kind of cyclical. It's like, oh, you'll talk about something for a long time. And then sometimes you'll get another detail. So you'll bring it back again. But usually by the time people are getting sick of me talking about something, I'm like, don't worry, we're ending. Like, we're wrapping up.
Yeah.
um, but I would say like in the recently, some like one of my deep dives that kind of came back around again was with Rachel Zoe, and that was super interesting for me to like kind of have a deep dive that I had worked on sort of have an additional thing come out almost a year later.
And what was so just talking about that, just because she
Yeah.
is in our Bravo world. So before we get into the Bethany of it all and everything, so you also got a cease and desist from Rachel Zoe.
I did. I did. In August of 2022, I had been doing these deep dives on mostly on her subscription box company. She has this subscription box company, and I don't know what prompted it, but I started looking at the comments on the company. It's called Curator, and the comments were really like, hey, it's been months and I haven't gotten my box. Hey, you keep charging my credit card. And so I started making videos about like, hey, here are the screenshots. Here's what's going on. All these people are saying they're not getting their product. And,